call the meeting to order. And is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposing. The motion passes. At this point, do I talk about the order of the agenda?
If you want to, or you can wait till we get through 4A and B and then move it up, or if you want to
I
just
think we'll do it right
go
now
ahead.
then.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see that point 5 there, it's meets and bounds. We're going to move that up right underneath where IUP farm animals is. The hearings on that, but that's just so that the people who are here will not have to listen to all of our discussion about driveway access standards and other things. It might get a little long, and I would ask, this could be a very long meeting, I would ask the council tonight to just be concise in their comments, if they can.
Very good.
Okay. So we have the approval of minutes. Does anyone have any corrections that they'd like to bring up?
I didn't see any.
Me either.
They're getting better.
Move to
They are.
approve the minutes as read.
Is there a second?
Second.
And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? No. And that motion passes. Okay, so now we're going to have some, a public hearing on a variance at 23558 Ulysses Street Northeast, a wetland setback in shoreland overlay. And Aaron's going to talk about that.
Yeah, give me 1 second here. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Everything Outdoors LLC on behalf of Dan Graff, the owner of 23558 Ulysses Street Northeast, is requesting a variance to reduce the shoreland overlay setback standard for the placement of an in-ground pool. This property is located in an R2 single-family and townhome residential zoning district in the West Side Estates subdivision and also in the Coopers Lake shoreland overlay. Zoning Appendix A, General Regulations, Section 57, Shoreland Overlay District classifies wetlands into multiple categories and are consistent with criteria found in Minnesota regulations, that is state statute, and the Protected Waters Inventory Map for Anoka County, Minnesota. Additionally, each classification has a required setback from the ordinary high water level. Coopers Lake has been classified as a natural environment with a defined 150-foot structural setback. This residence was constructed in 2006 and was placed 161.22 feet from the ordinary high water level as identified on a certificate of survey dated May 5th of 2004, which was included in your packet. According to the survey, there is 87.60 feet of distance between the rear of the house and the rear lot line. Elevations identified on the survey show that there's a 12-foot elevation change or a steep drop-off between the rear of the lot line and the edge of the ordinary high water level. This area between the rear lot line and Coopers Lake is owned by the city of East Bethel and included in part of the John Anderson Park. The property owners have proposed placing an in-ground pool with a concrete apron in the rear yard within the 150-foot shoreland overlay setback. This required rear yard setback, the required rear yard setback in an R2 zoning district without the shoreland overlay component is only 10 feet. The proposed placement is 21 feet from the rear property line. However, that is approximately 94 feet from the nearest point of the identified ordinary high water level. Section 57 of the Shoreland Overlay District, Subdivision 6, under administration, it says compliance. The use of any shoreland of public waters, the size and shape of lots, the use, size, type, and location of structures on lots, the installation and maintenance of water supply or wastewater removal systems, the grading, the filling, shoreland area, the cutting of shoreland vegetation, and the subdivision of land shall be in full compliance with the terms of the ordinance and other applicable regulations. In cases where standards conflict with the standards of the base zoning district, so the base zoning district in this case is R2, the more restrictive standard will prevail. So in this case, the more restrictive standard is the setback distance from the ordinary high water level. This section also requires notification to the Department of Natural Resources. Copies of all notices of any public hearing to consider variances, amendments, or conditional uses under shoreland management controls shall be sent to the commissioner or the commissioner's designated representative and postmarked at least 10 days before the hearing. Also included in section 57 is variances. Variances may only be granted in accordance with Minnesota state statute, and no variances may be granted for prohibited uses. When a variance is approved after the Department of Natural Resources has formally recommended denial of the hearing record, the notification of the approved variance shall be sent to the Department of Natural Resources and including the City Council's summary of the public record, testimony, and findings of fact and conclusions which support the issuance of the variance. A public hearing notice and email copy was sent to the North Metro representative for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. As of this date, including this afternoon of this report, no response or contact has been made with city staff regarding this variance request. Subdivision 8, Shoreland Overlay District Standards, placement, designs, and height of structures. Placement of structures on lots, again, states that when more than one setback apply to a site, structure and facilities must be located to meet all setbacks. I included section 10 under general development regulations, subsection 36, which is the extent of pool regulations that the city of East Bethel has in ordinances, which is extremely limited. However, it does state that all swimming pools and their accessories must be located a minimum of 10 feet from all side and rear property lines that abut other lots and may not extend into the minimum front yard setback, which is essentially the boulevard. The consideration of a variance requires the Planning Commission consider a 3-factor test for practical difficulty. The first factor is a test of reasonableness, which means the landowner would likely use the property in a practical way but cannot do so under the rules of the ordinance. It does not mean that the land cannot be put to reasonable use whatsoever without the variance. In this case, a swimming pool is identified as an allowable accessory use in a residential district. The variance request to place an in-ground pool in a shoreland overlay setback may not be a reasonable request. The second factor is that the landowner's problem is due to circumstances unique to the property and not caused by the landowner. The uniqueness generally relates to the physical characteristics of a particular piece of property, that is, to the land and not the personal characteristics or preferences of the landowner. In this case, the property is located in the Coopers Lake shoreland overlay with specific setback requirements, and the primary residence was constructed within 10 feet of the setback requirements from the ordinary high water level. The primary residence was constructed over 475 feet from the front lot line, 17 feet from the north property line, and 23 feet from the south property line. This placement limits the buildable area available side to the side, rear, and rear yard for any accessory construction. There are terraced elevations throughout the property, both in the front and the rear yard, and the subsurface sewage treatment system, SSTS, or septic, and well are located in the front of the house. The third factor is that the variance would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. This factor is used to consider whether the resulting structure would be out of scale, out of place, or otherwise inconsistent with the surroundings. In this case, the proposed location of the in-ground pool is the rear yard and would not be visible from the right-of-way. The primary residence was constructed over 475 feet from the front property line. Standing tree growth along both property lines screen the rear yard from neighboring properties. The Planning Commission should review the information, hold a public hearing, and make a recommendation of approval or denial to the City Council for the variance reduction to the standard shoreland overlay setback from 150 feet to 94 feet for the placement of an in-ground pool at 23558 Ulysses Street Northeast.
Thank you. Are you able to show the photos?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Which specific photos are you looking for?
So There was one that showed kind of where the placement of the pool was.
Right there.
Is this one?
Mhm.
I wonder if it's the next one. Okay, so do you have one that shows where the pool is going to be placed?
I do not. This is the drawing that was sent to me from the pool installer, which shows distances. And I did include a survey from the survey company, which shows the distance from the house to the ordinary high water level, as well as the house to the rear yard. That should be in your packet, two pages before this one.
Okay, then if you could go back to the one that looks like this, then the kind of the,
Oh, the map, yep.
Can you zoom in on that at all?
On which one?
The map.
I can.
Zoom in where the deck is and the property that's proposed.
Yep, and I'm gonna go to a different year view that is much better for us to see.
Okay.
great.
So this is from 2020, but the aerial photography in 2020 was better than in 2023, so I often find myself going back to this one for better views.
All right, so we're going to open up the public hearing now. I kind of like it, if there's any people that are not the homeowners and want to say anything, if you could come up first, please, to the microphone. Thank you. Okay. And when you come up, if you could please state your name and address.
Jeremy Summers, Cambridge, Minnesota, 3700, 323rd Avenue Northeast, Cambridge, Minnesota.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions that you have?
And typically at this time with the public hearing, we'll have the public come up, they can address any comments that they might want, and then we'll bring up homeowner or anybody to help with the follow-up stuff.
Okay.
And then, once we have their questions, we typically respond at that point, if there is anyone.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't think we have any neighbors that are coming up, correct? Okay.
Great.
So, do you folks have anything that you'd like to ask of the contractor?
You can close the public hearing too if you want to do that right away. There's nobody here to
Yeah.
speak, so.
Well, so I am curious, could you just point on the map where this is going?
So it's 64 feet off, so I think you're only 12 feet into the variance. So it's, if you pull up the other picture, it's right up against the deck. So sort of like right here.
So there's no way that our stenographer is gonna be able to hear him talking over
Yeah,
there.
we need you to
and-
speak into the microphone,
and,
otherwise we can't hear you.
How many
So-
feet from the deck?
It's 64 feet from the house, and I think it's 12 feet from the deck.
You want your drawing back?
Go ahead. So we're 60 feet from the house, yeah, it's 46 feet from the house, and it'd be 12 feet from the deck. So technically, the edge of the pool would be right about there. So if you're looking at this and put it up against that, it's gonna be probably right about that general vicinity.
Okay, then if you could come back to the microphone, please, and,
Yeah.
and so how many feet is it from the lake then?
From the lake, we are 81 feet.
Okay.
But I think it's more like 90-some, according to what they found on their high water part.
From the high water?
It's really hard to kind of go down there and figure out where the high water was and where it's not. Our best guess was 81 feet without an actual perfect survey of it. So the high water mark that they marked out from looking at their overlay was 94 feet. So we're only approaching it, I think, by 12 or something in that general vicinity, correct?
I have different measurements than you do. If the house is only 161 feet from the ordinary high water mark and we're putting a pool 46 feet from the house, we have gone more than,
12 feet.
we've reduced it more than 84.
Okay, yep.
So,
I'd say by about 70 feet into the 150-foot setback from the DNR, or natural resources.
And so that was some of my concern, and I did reach out today again by phone to the North Metro hydrologist for the Minnesota DNR, and I still have not heard. I left him a voicemail. My concern as a city staff who is in charge of the ordinance and in charge of administration sees that there are a number of references to the DNR and would maybe caution the Planning Commission that if you guys are willing to entertain a variance to this, that you make it conditional. If we do hear from the DNR between now and the council meeting, this may not even be an option if the DNR says no. So that's just one thought I have.
Yeah, that was my concern too. We've dealt with the DNR a few times. It takes a while to get through that whole system.
So
We
how
don't
far,
have to-
I'm sorry,
No, sorry.
how far a gap is between the slab and the deck?
Well, when you're looking at that slab, I think it's 10 feet off the edge of the pool.
It says 8 foot on the drawing.
8 foot, yeah.
Do you see what I'm looking at?
I don't think the
The
deck
hand-
is in that photo.
The hand drawing?
Yeah, the one with the pool.
Well, it says 46 feet from the
House.
house
The house to the edge of water.
to the edge of
No.
the concrete
Edge of water
slab.
is what it's supposed to be.
46 feet.
You've got 8 feet from the pool to the edge of the concrete slab.
So it'd be
Yeah.
8 feet from the edge of pool back towards the house. It's 46 feet from the house to the edge of the pool.
Edge of the concrete slab.
And it's supposed to be edge of pool.
Okay.
So what is the gap between the deck and the slab? I guess that's my question.
I think it's like 12 feet.
It's also a 20-foot wide pool.
It's also a 20-foot wide pool.
What's your construction schedule if this were to be approved by the city council? We just give a recommendation. So when are you hoping to do this?
We're hoping to start by mid-July. If not, we'll be moving a few things around. But, or hopefully mid-July. He's pretty adamant about getting it done ASAP.
My concern is I don't think the measurements on here are right in the written, just because the way you were talking about 8 feet from the deck, and then it talks about 40, the drawing shows 46 feet from the house.
Yeah. It's 46 from the foundation of the house
Okay,
to the edge of the pool, and then it's 20 feet wide. Most of the time, they only ask for from, edge of pool to edge of water's edge.
and then how large, I mean, not to be
20 feet wide.
really crazy, but how, from the house to the end of the deck, how wide is that?
I never measured the deck. Because we always go off the sides of the house. The deck's pretty decent size. I want to say it's approximately 15, 20 feet wide from the house to the edge of the outer deck.
So in order to assist in trying to answer, or maybe visually answer this, Jeremy, how far from the edge of the house to the edge of the pool?
46 feet.
Okay, so if I mark this out, 46 feet, and then the pool is 20 feet wide.
Yep.
So that'd be 66 feet. We're gonna agree to that, right?
66.
Okay.
I don't think you're measuring from the edge of the house because that's inset from the other area.
Well,
That's
there's,
from the straight biggest bump out on the house, which would be
There.
the bottom of the foundation here.
Yeah.
so where my blue line starts up here,
Yep.
as close to under the eave as I can get it.
Now I hate to ask how close are we to the property line there?
No, so if this is 66 feet from the edge of the house, this is where the edge of the pool is gonna be?
The far
And
edge?
The farthest edge,
There'd be the farthest edge. If
And
concrete
then-
counts, the walkway up top would be another 8 feet.
so that
And I
puts this
Make it skinnier if I had to, but
21 feet roughly from this property line.
Yep.
But then 90 feet to the water.
And it's supposed to be 150.
150. So one of the diagrams on the survey shows you that the nearest spot on the house to the nearest spot of the ordinary high water mark is 161 feet. And I think if I remember correctly, it was something like this.
Yeah, it went way out to that corner.
Somehow they got 161 feet. I don't know how they did it, but they did.
Like when I was saying, I'm like,
New
well, if
math.
you measured from the edge of the pool to that, it's way over it, but if you go straight off of the house.
So if this is gonna be the edge of the pool.
Yep.
From lot line to lot line, just hypothetically, the pool's gonna be in this area here, but that is 21 or 22 feet from the rear property line. I think in my report I said 21 feet was when I measured out, when I was measuring. But that is still within the 150. Because if the house is only 161,
Exactly.
What is that structure?
they have a shed or a gazebo, or not a gazebo, but like it's marked on the survey. They have it labeled something.
So that's not in proper spacing?
Well, Corey, sometimes there's non-conformities, we don't ask questions.
Okay.
Neither is a bunch of the neighbor stuff.
Yeah,
Otherwise, we would never make
there's a
it
covering
through.
there of sorts.
We'd never make it through one day in East Bethel if we tried to correct everything in one day.
So my only concern about, all right, well, I have two concerns. Number one is the DNR is usually very rigid on their shoreline. And I say that from being on the other side of the lake. I mean, they're really strict on what they do. And then the other thing is, if we are approving a variance for that property, it's difficult for other properties with the similar situation for us not to approve that. So then we have to think, if we approve this, even if the chance is that the DNR would be okay, are they gonna be okay with the second
The
and the third
precedence.
request?
Yeah. And we're gonna,
Yes.
we could discuss that when we
Yep,
get through the
okay.
public hearing. So does anybody have any more questions for Jeremy? Okay, thank
Well,
you very
I do have
much.
one.
Oh, Glenn
Do you
has
have
one.
an alternative site, since it's a very spacious property, do you have an alternative if this doesn't go through?
Not really at the moment, he's talked about the front yard.
If you look at the second survey in the packet, this is where the septic and the well are located. Just so you have an idea, this is the house, the front side of the house. The well is here. The septic is in the ground right here on this side of the driveway. The alternative spot for a septic, should this one fail, is in front of that one. So this essentially eliminates this side of the driveway for anything, leaving only this area on the north side of the driveway as potential spot for accessory building of some sort.
That makes it tough.
Yeah, if you look at the if you look at the lot, although it is screened from the right of way by the tree growth, as a homeowner, I don't know if I'd want a in-ground pool in the front yard next to my driveway, but that is potentially an option.
I don't know if you go for that one.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, well, thank you, and we're going
Thank
to
you.
close the public hearing on this, and then, Diana, let's get back to your questions and concerns.
Yeah, and I apologize
Well, it's
for bringing that up. Now, my second thing was gonna be exactly what you said. Is there an alternative just because of the DNR? So you guys already heard what I have to say. It doesn't sound like the property owner would be interested in an alternative.
Mhm.
One other thought that I have, and this, I don't know if this is gonna muddy the water at all, no pun intended. An in-ground pool or an above-ground pool are not defined as an accessory structure in our code. Now, does that then make an in-ground pool an accessory structure? I don't know. I just know that if you're gonna alter the setback by digging in the setback for the ordinary high water level, it's defined by state statute and code, that I would say that that's probably a structure, even though it's in ground. If they put an above ground pool in here, would we even know about it or be excited about it? probably not.
Right, I mean, no
Um,
permits needed
so-
at all.
So I don't know what, they would need a permit for the pool because it's.
For the above ground,
No, for the above ground, no,
right,
but in ground, yes, because of the depth that the
Sure.
pool is.
Or if they extended the deck.
To the
To
pool,
said
yeah, there's a
above
number
ground
of
then,
factors,
yeah.
but our code clearly does not state that an in-ground pool is an accessory structure. This one is, again, too muddy. That's why I need your help and advice and.
okay. Well, I think it's premature to do anything until we hear from the DNR, really. I don't know if we can table it.
I mean, boy, I mean, a notice was sent.
I think
We
it's
made a
easier
good
to make
faith
a
effort to
recommendation.
communicate with them. They are the ones that are required to respond. That's why I suggest if you are considering an approval recommendation, that you maybe include a contingency that if the DNR comes back with a restriction, that supersede the variance. And then 2 weeks from now, if we hear back from the DNR before it makes it to the council, that information could be relayed to the council. The contingency can be removed if that is the case. But you guys can make whatever recommendation you want. If you want to recommend tabling, you can certainly do that too. Knowing the applicant's construction schedule, if we table, we're not going to see it for another month. Then it's 2 weeks more before it makes it to the council meeting. A contingency option leaves it out there so that if it does come through, an answer does, it is acceptable, then it can move on to council in 2 weeks. If an answer doesn't come in, then it lands on the council to make that decision.
So, is anyone in favor of this? I guess I'm asking.
I have a hard time with the precedence piece of it. It's just, it's almost half the distance, or a little over a third of what the requirement is there, and I can't get behind opening up that can of worms down the road. We already have too many things that we've created precedents on already that could easily come up.
Glenn?
The things that concern me are, one, besides being a lakefront, it's also a public park. I mean, not the whole, that area right there, but the lake itself is a public park. So it impacts possibly visually people that are enjoying the park as opposed to just the immediate neighbors from that backside. Also that I don't know why, I should have asked during the public hearing, but why that slab couldn't be right next to the deck and eliminate the 12 feet, 12 feet between the two, which would make it a little better. It wouldn't solve it completely, but it would, I mean, a lot of people have a deck around a pool. So there's 12 feet of space that's not accounted for there. Maybe there's a reason, but I don't know. And then the other thing is, with the variance, is there an option? Which is why I asked that. It's not a preferred option, and I understand why that would be, but it's not like it's either this or no pool is possible. But the main thing is the setback from the shoreline. And we didn't mention if there is any 100-year floodplain line.
Well, the ordinary high water level would be what is determined by a hydrologist to be the usual balance of where the water is at the highest and the lowest and the mid. I mean, I can throw on an overlay here, but this is not going to be probably answer what you're looking for in terms of 100. Well, hold on. Let's do this. So there's the FEMA floodplain level. This would be your 100-year floodplain level. And if I take that off, this would be the wetland. And then if I go back and change to another year, you can see where the line is and where the shoreland is. And if I change to 2023, you can see where that is compared to where it used to be. And if I go back to 2017, you can see that it's also in a different spot, and the water looks pretty high here. And then here's 2020. But regardless, we don't determine what that ordinary high water level is. That's determined by the county or the state in terms of what the level is, so.
And if
Right,
we
that
see-
just addressed my concern is, which in favor of the owner of whether that, I mean, you have an in-ground pool and then it would merge with the water level if
Oh,
it was.
Well,
but it doesn't.
as I said in my staff report, Commissioner Terry, there's 12 feet of elevation change between the back lot line and the lake, actually. So it's gonna take a lot of water to go
Yeah.
12 feet up to interfere with the pool that's 20 feet away from yet that lot line. So,
Doesn't make too big of a difference once the water gets there, if it did.
So that part is good.
Okay. Diana, did you have anything else?
So everything on the, I don't even see northeast, towards the lake is park.
yes, city-owned land.
And there's no fence or anything that's gonna be required there. So that is an additional, concern I would have is, you know, the people using the park and then the pool being there.
I'm not certain they can get to this part of the park.
Most
Okay.
most insurance carriers are gonna require you have that, for an in-ground pool, are gonna require having it fenced with a self-locking gate. Now, there's alternatives to that as far as versus normal privacy fence versus just something that you can install into the concrete that, again, can be secured right around the pool itself, but that's
Right.
something I run into often with clients that have pools.
Okay. Did you have something urgent, Jeremy, to say?
I was gonna say, it also has an auto cover that's locked with a keypad.
Yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately, that doesn't pass the snuff test with most underwriters, just from experience.
And that says the park is landlocked.
Yeah.
Okay. Corey?
Oh, is it, okay.
Yeah, if you see this.
I
long
agree with
triangle.
Glenn's comment about,
Can't
I sure wish they would have tried to gain as much property towards the house. I mean, we could easily gain 12 feet, plus not have an 8-foot slab, which it's awesome, but we could have gained, 15 feet towards the house. And I just think we have to wait for the DNR.
Okay.
I think that's not even an option myself.
Yeah, that my, last comment on this, I agree with you. And the only, that when I was reading through this, that's what I was thinking. Can we get closer to the house? We make an exception, but then the precedence is my thing too, is if we approve the variance here, you know, what precedents are we setting for the rest of that?
Well,
And
look
and
at the
in
two
short-
houses to the south. If they come in and want a pool, they're gonna be.
Exactly. And that.
It's such a
and-
bummer that the setback is 475 feet. If it would have been
Closer.
425
Right.
to the road, but
And that's why it's unfortunate that we don't have a response from the DNR,
yeah.
because if the DNR was like, hey, okay, which I doubt they're gonna be, I'd be shocked.
I just don't.
I think even with
You know,
that though, I think
then
we're
it-
still coming back to our primary arguments of, again, precedence, distance. That's, for me, I guess I feel comfortable enough making a motion for denial, or motion to recommend denial to the city council.
Okay. So we have that motion out there, and by the way, I apologize. I did not ask for motion to open the discussion. I don't know if we can go ahead and,
We don't need a motion to discuss if we're already
Okay.
discussing. That was
Fabulous.
more of another individual's preference of
alrighty,
having that, so
so I'm cool.
you're good.
Okay, good. So we have a motion to deny, or
Motion
to recommend.
denial.
Is there
I
a
will second that.
Okay, great. Any more discussion? No. If not, all in favor of the motion to recommend denial of this variance, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That being the case, that motion passed.
So that'll go city council in 2 weeks. so-
July 8th.
So yeah, it'll still be heard before city council. City council makes the final decision. This is just our recommendation based on public hearings and immediate findings.
Okay, the next thing up on the agenda, while Aaron is getting things together, is gonna be an IUP, or on farm animals at 22343 Sandy Drive Northeast regarding an alpaca, llama, or sheep and goats. And Aaron is going to do some reading about this issue. And then after that, then we're going to open up a public hearing and we'll ask any neighbors and the landowners to come up afterwards here.
All right. Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. John and Petra, the owners of 22334 Sandy Drive Northeast, are requesting an IUP for the keeping of 1 alpaca or llama and 9 sheep or goats or 11 sheep or goats. This property is reported to be 5.16 acres and is located in an R2 single-family and townhome residential zoning district. City Code Chapter 10, Article 5, Section 10, 151 requires that a minimum of 1 fenced acre of pasture land plus any indicated fraction thereof must be provided for each animal unit as described in subdivision H, which is the chart. I will make that bigger here in a little bit. Although the applicant's property is 5.6 acres after mapping out the required setbacks, there is approximately, by my estimation, 4.41 acres of possible pasture land with some areas of tree cover. Staff calculations would afford the applicants 1 alpaca or llama and 6 sheep or goats, or 7 sheep and goats based on the 4.41 acres of available pasture land. Section 10, 150 defines pasture land as land with vegetation cover used for grazing livestock. Pasture growth can consist of grasses, shrubs, deciduous trees, or a mixture, but not wetlands. This property does not currently have any fencing as the date of the application. The applicants intend on using an electric fence rotating the pasture land throughout their available pasture space. Appendix A, Section 25, 1B, barbed wire and electric fences are prohibited except on lots with an approved interim use permit for the keeping and confining of farm animals, livestock, or for crop protection. The proposed pasture land areas, farm animal shelter will be required to meet all setbacks as required by Chapter 10, Article 5, Section 10, 152. There is an existing barn on the property proposed to be used as a shelter for the animals. City staff is requesting the Planning Commission hold a public hearing for this IUP request and make a recommendation of approval to include a defined number of animals and any trial period to the City Council for the keeping of farm animals at 22343 Sandy Drive Northeast with conditions as defined in the resolution.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to open up the public hearing. And what do you have for pictures, Aaron?
I have a picture of the location of the property, which isn't all that far from City Hall here. Mm-hmm. Here's a picture, an aerial of the property itself without any drawings or alterations. That's very pixelated, I apologize. This one might be better. As you can see, here is the barn structure. And then there is what used to be cropland here prior to the applicant's purchase. That could be used for pasture, however, there is no fencing at this point. They intend on fencing, just haven't got to it as we moved this quickly as we could through to the Planning Commission. Mm-hmm. And then I also mapped out my, excuse me, the best I could using our mapping tools to define area that could potentially be pasture land to meet all of the structural setbacks and property line setbacks, which would need to be fenced at 4.41 acres. There's a potential, I suppose, for a little bit more pasture land right here up beside the house if they gated the driveway, but it's not gonna reach 4.5 acres if you add another 1/10 or 2 or 100th at that point, depending on how, you know, the area.
Right, okay. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna ask, first of all, if there are any neighbors or anybody that wants to have some input before the applicant comes up, please do. And looking like there is not, so Petra, are you coming up?
Sure.
Okay. And you're both coming up? Okay, that's fine. If you could just please, yeah, that's fine. And if you wanted to come up, that's fine, but just state, both of you state your name, please.
Petra Fager, 22-343 Sandy Drive Northeast.
John Fager, 22-343 Sandy Drive Northeast.
Okay, great. First of all, I'm going to just ask the council, our commission members, if you have any questions. And if not, then we're going to have you kind of state your case, please. Any questions before
Do
we?
you guys have experience with sheep, lambs, etc., livestock?
My grandfather was a cattle rancher, so I've got a little bit, but not any, without any direct supervision, no.
Okay.
And that has been several decades now since the last time I was out on his place.
And it says here you intend to use electric fence.
Yes.
How am I assured that that works?
What has kind of become standard amongst the homesteading community is an electric kind of netting type fence.
Okay.
With posts approximately every 12 to 16 feet.
Okay.
And then you have a charger with either a battery or a solar panel to keep that battery charged as well. And then that will, it's not so much necessarily a physical barrier, because if the electricity ever did die for some reason, the animal would probably be able to push through if it so chose.
Sure.
But it's more of that psychological barrier of getting, zapped a couple of times and then like, okay, I don't want to go there unless I'm hungry because I haven't rotated the paddock or the
Food source.
food source, correct, yes.
And then my last question would be, if they have little ones,
Right.
do you intend on keeping, or how does that work?
Well, we're intending to keep the number that we get approval for. So
Okay.
we have 5 identified right now, 2 adults and 3 lambs. So that's within either our original request or what Aaron calculated. And so
Okay.
we can sell
That'll be the goal. Is to-
whatever to keep
Yeah.
within the limit.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, do you have a question, or did you want them to talk about it first? Diana?
I don't
like
have
you
any
did.
questions.
Okay.
But
Okay,
thank
well,
you.
why don't you just kind of tell us a little bit about what you're doing there then, please?
We left the city and bought a farm, so we want to do some farming on it. We both work, I'm a realtor, and we do a lot of work from home and homeschool our kids, so I'm around most of the time, and John's a postal worker, so he's working a day job, but we just want to be self-sufficient to some extent and enjoy it as a hobby, and so, yeah.
And as my wife said, we do homeschool our kids, so there's an opportunity to add to their curriculum through that with, biology, dealing with animals, the ecology of the property as we're trying to recover it back from the row cropping land back into more of a meadow pasture type property. Yeah, and speaking with one of the neighbors who has been there for almost 70 years now, that's what it historically had been, was a farm property with dairy cattle and whatnot. So.
Okay. Why do you want to have more than what would be allowed?
So I filled out the application and I didn't understand that our whole property wouldn't be counted. So we have 5.6 acres, so they did the math of the grid, and that's where I got my original numbers from. The overlay that Aaron calculated is fine. I mean, we're looking at medium-sized sheep, so I don't think they'll have any trouble living on this size property. So we'd still request a consideration of our original number, but if that's not approved, then we'll obviously abide by whatever is approved. But most of the property is edible to a sheep or whatnot, so.
Any other questions for Petra? And it's John?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming up. And at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing. And do we want to do motions for discussion? If we don't have to, I would
I'm
prefer not.
content to drop that, because for 20 years on this board, we never did that before.
Fabulous.
Like I said, that was the precedent set by another individual who wanted to have it, and it
Okay,
wasn't a hurtful thing.
so we're just gonna talk.
Yeah, we can either go right into discussion, or, and Glenn, please correct me on this, even before that, a lot of times it was, we'd get to here, and then, yeah, we'd either just start a discussion, or if it was a simple enough approach, someone would make a motion, it'd be seconded, then we'd have the discussion on that, and then whether that passed, failed, or there'd be a secondary motion if that passed or
Yeah.
failed.
Well, I prefer to have the discussion, and then at a point when it seems like a motion for either approval or denial feels like it's right, then the person can do that.
Perfect, yep, I just want to give you
Okay.
some history on it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Aaron?
I just want to let you guys know how I came to the calculations that I came to, as opposed to what was requested originally. So as you can see in our code here, it requires that a minimum of 1 fenced acre of pasture land plus any fraction. So the first request was for an alpaca or a llama, which requires 1 acre. Right, so immediately we got to lose an acre off of the 4.41 available. So now we have 3.41 available. Now, then in the chart, it says 1 goat or sheep is for every half acre. So if you do the math, we're getting to 6 with what's left or available. So that's how I came up with my numbers of 1 alpaca or llama and 9 sheep or goats. And then, or no, excuse me.
1 and 6, or
Yeah,
7.
1 and 6 or 7, because
Yeah.
even if you had just the first sheep or goat, that requires 1 acre, and then you'd get a half for every other one after that. So that's how I came to my numbers. I don't know how that chart came to live, but that's what's in our code.
Has there been any fees so far for applying for the IUP?
They paid the application fee,
And how much is that?
$300, I believe, and then there's a $500 escrow, and then there's a $55 filing fee that we return to, or after we file with the county, we return their $500 escrow. So $300 essentially, $355.
Has been so far?
Yes.
And then, I was reading before that, one of the conditions might be that the IUP would have to be renewed or whatever, which would be another $300 every time that has to
Correct.
be renewed, correct?
However, that has been a past history that I found when researching IUPs for farm animals. As you know, in my time here in 2 years, we haven't had one of these yet. So I have to go back and see how things have been handled in the past. Some that I saw most recent in history gave a 1 year essentially trial period. If there were no issues or complaints after the 1 year, a renewal of 3 year, 5 year, 7 year, or indefinite was then granted after that, the second round. So, but the applicants would need to reapply after the 1 year.
But they could be indefinite.
It all depends on how the decision makers decide.
Okay.
I'm wondering how much acreage would need to be added to add 1 more sheep or goat?
We'd need to get to 4.50 acres.
So that's really close to 4.41. So I'm wondering about that triangle by the driveway.
First thing we need to be 75 feet from the house.
And the driveway would have to be gated.
And then we would require that the driveway be gated. Also has to be 5 feet from the property line. Close as I can get. It's not scientific either. Let's go acres, because that'll give me an idea. I can't remember how far I came here, but so it's 0.8. So if you add that to 0.41, that's 0.49. You still don't get to 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I did offer the applicant the opportunity to go out and measure their property, put some stakes down, provide some measurements of a site plan, because there's no guarantee that my 2,000 foot aerial is 100% accurate either.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is a decision you all get to make.
Aaron, one thing that I should have asked the applicants, but I forgot to do that, was, is there going to be a fence around the whole area, or is it more like a sheep tractor where they move the fencing with the sheep to where they're pasturing?
The applicant applied with a rotating fence, which tells me that it's not going to be a permanent fence.
Mm-hmm.
You can certainly ask them to come back up and answer that question if you'd like. Our ordinance does state that they have to have 1 acre of land, pasture land, fenced. Does that mean it can be a rotating fence? I mean, our ordinance isn't clear on that, so.
Okay.
You can also make that a condition if you want.
Peter or John, would you mind coming up and just speak into the microphone with that rather than from where you are? So yeah, my question is, were you planning on doing the whole fence or more like a sheep tractor type thing?
Our intent was to get going with whatever would be approved, but this season still we intended to apply for a perimeter fence. So that would be permanent, and then we'd be doing the electric rotational fencing inside of that.
Okay.
So if that was a condition, we would live with that, but we've identified sheep we're hoping to get over, so we're hoping not to have to wait too long for their owners to be able to send them over, so.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion?
Just one question about being on top of the septic system. Is that normal? Or
There's nothing in our ordinance that says they can or cannot fence pasture land around a septic system. I specifically looked at that because I had the same question you did, Commissioner
Interesting.
Jorgensen, and there is nothing in our code. We do prohibit people from driving over a septic system, of course, but a sheep or goat or llama does not weigh the same weight as a car or motorcycle, UTV, ATV, those kind of things. So, I mean, it will be nice green grass if they're hungry, is my assumption.
Where does the 75 feet setback come from?
The code states that
I'm actually interested in the rationale as to why that number.
were you on the planning commission, Glenn, when this ordinance was passed? By any
Good
chance?
chance.
Back in the
but,
day?
325 ordinances ago, that might have been the case.
Let me see. Here's the setback chart from our farm animal ordinance. And if you go to the chart on setback requirements, 75 feet from a residential structure is the bottom line down here, number 4.
Does anyone have insight as to why that might be? Because that's like the length of this room, approximately.
I grew up in a city. I have no idea.
Can't say the purpose behind it, but I know we're not here to open the code tonight either for that, so. Try to stay within our IUP request.
The reason I mention that is with that added triangle, we're 1/100th of an acre away from having them, or granting another sheep or goat.
Except for the llama.
Yeah,
Right.
not another llama, but another sheep or goat.
Yeah, we would struggle to find the right amount of territory between what they want for sheep and goat or goats and adding an additional llama or alpaca.
Yeah.
I think 2 of those would eliminate the number of sheep that they're actually have on reserve or are looking for, so.
And what she identified was, you know, just maximum of what their land was at, not a specific number, and they seem to be amenable to whatever our findings are, and if they wanted to measure out, they could definitely measure out for more to try to appeal for an extra, if that's what they come up with at the time they wanna measure.
Okay, Peter, I'll get to you in just a sec. Does anybody have any strong feelings of either wanting to recommend denial or recommend approval on this?
I'm leaning towards approval with the staff's recommendation on size. And honestly, the septic makes me a little nervous because I'd hate to see them eat everything off the top and have a harsh winter, and I'd feel bad for them if their septic system froze. And so even if we gave them a little more land over here, if they just end up having to fence off that area to not be used, that would deduct a little. So that's my reasoning for going with the recommendation that's
Okay.
on here.
So you're leaning towards approval, Tanner?
Yeah, I'd also lean towards approval. Obviously, for me, the biggest part of this is making sure proper fencing, properly gated, that they're contained and not, you know, roaming beyond the property. So however they need to manage that.
As a condition in the resolution, I did put that city staff would have to verify that there is at least a minimum of 1 acre pasture before we even have animals delivered to the property. So that would be a condition, and until that 1 acre is established, however it gets established, there won't be any animals delivered, so.
Yeah, I know in the past we've had some residents who've got animals, whether it be large or small, and it's not fenced right away, and they continue to stretch it, so yeah, I'd be in the
Okay.
camp of making sure proper fencing is there before any livestock arrives.
And on this end?
Well, this property is like the far extent of, if I take a walk with my wife, so I'm familiar with it, and it's stood vacant for a while. It's hard for me to imagine the property of that size being overburdened by an additional sheep or goat to what they're requesting, because that's, being there, I've seen that it's a lot of land. So, but I'm definitely for approval.
Okay, Diana?
First, I wanted to say this was very easy to read through. So I really appreciate all the work you guys did to give us the detail and also work with the owners to come up with the numbers. And you said historically a lot of these would be approved for maybe a year and then re-looked at. So the fact that they're going to do rotating fence and then eventually they want to have it fenced in, I think is a great opportunity for us to let them be successful. And I came to the meeting ready to approve this one.
Okay. And I feel the same. I would not like to see them have to renew this yearly or even every 3 years or 5 years. That's $300 for, I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm in a camp of indefinite, but I like the idea of the one year probation on it and then 5 year after that.
So are you saying 1 year and have to reapply for the IUP or 5-year IUP?
One year, and then after, and if the IUP is not voided
Then
due to
just go for it.
violation, it'd be 5 years from then
Yeah.
Okay.
on, and then that'd be a 5-year cycle from there.
And would they
I
have to
just-
come to us?
Renewals go immediately to the city council.
Okay.
The reason why the reason why I'm strongly against it, an indefinite, is a lot of time, IUPs aren't always transferable, but again, get to that precedent, so you leave it open-ended, and then you never know what happens down the road, so.
Okay.
In an IUP, it's our opportunity to put some kind of limitations on it based on
Kids and grandkids wanting to have sheep.
all sorts of things, or well, we've seen it before with other livestock and horses, where someone had a grandparent who had a property, and they were there when they grew up, and then all of a sudden now they have the property, and they didn't know that the IUP had expired or not, and then they violated, and it's a whole thing, so.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay.
And then they don't put up a fence for a year after.
Does anyone have a motion to make?
I will make a motion to approve staff recommendation for approval of this IUP.
So in my recommendation, I need you to define
The
number of
conditions.
animals and a time frame. So
You
go
had a
to page-
suggestion,
I
right?
do
Which
have a
page was it?
suggestion.
Because I know I
It's on
asked it.
page 20, wait, I'm sorry,
26?
19.
19?
19? Okay.
Staff calculations would afford the applicants 1 alpaca or llama and 6 sheep or goats. Or if you were not in favor of the alpaca or llama, it would be 7 sheep or goats, based on my calculation.
Okay, so I'll correct my motion.
Okay,
To
thanks.
approve, with compliance of staff's suggestion. And we would just need the resident to confirm if they were gonna do the 6 or the 7.
And how about the length of the IUP?
I agree with the 1 year, and,
As a-
because I think that gives them an idea, and that also gives them the opportunity to make a change if they were to maybe even acquire more land, or there was an adjustment in how they moved around things on their property. And if things go well, I'm pretty confident it would go.
So you're
Yeah,
saying
sounds-
1-year probation?
1 year probation.
And then 5-year renewal?
Do we have to state a 5-year renewal?
You do not. This is
I didn't think so.
at the end of 1 year, when they come in to renew the IUP, then a time frame can be determined. And I wouldn't necessarily use the word probation, it's just a 1-year IUP.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah,
But then there is a renewal fee at
And
the
the
end of
renewal
1 year.
fee would kick in after 1 year, but that goes strictly to the council, and then any time frame after that can be defined,
But that would be defined by council,
council,
Mhm.
Yep.
or staff recommendation.
so that, I think it would be good to do staff recommendation in your motion, so that they know we're thinking.
okay, so.
Okay, this is getting to be quite emotional.
My
Just start
motion
it fresh.
is to approve based on 1 alpaca and the choice between the 6 sheep or the 7 sheep choice.
No
With a-
alpaca.
No alpaca, yep, no alpaca. And with a 1-year term, with renewal
For a 5-year term.
for a
if
5-year
all
term,
goes well.
if all goes
If the
well.
city council's.
If
so
city
chooses.
council approves. Is that good enough?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, great. Is there a second? to
I'll
that
second
wonder-
it.
Great, fabulous. Okay, and all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? So that motion passes. And now you will be going to the city council in a couple weeks, July 8th, and they will rule on this then. So thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Did you want to move an item up on the agenda if I
Yes,
recall?
we are going to. So the next thing on the agenda is going to be the meets and bounds lot split at 516 217th Avenue Northeast. And Aaron Berg is going to get his things together. We are not having a public hearing on this, is that correct?
It's correct, all you need to do is, well, it's in my recommendation, we'll get there when we get there.
Thank you.
So this is going to be on page 33
Yep, of the packet.
of our packet.
On June 10th, 2024, Keith Gallagher submitted an application for a meets and bounds split of a 20-acre parcel of land located at 516 217th Avenue Northeast into 3 parcels. The first parcel will contain the original single-family home and be divided off as a 10-acre lot. The remaining 10 acres will be subdivided equally into 2 5-acre lots. The property proposed for the division is zoned rural residential, and per city code appendix A zoning section 42, the minimum lot size for any division is 2 acres. To be eligible for using a meets and bounds split division as outlined by the zoning code, the parcel must be a minimum of 5 acres. The parcel must have minimum road frontage of 300 feet. The parcel must contain 23,000 square feet of buildable area. Appropriate road, public utility, and or drainage easements as outlined in Ordinance 151 must be dedicated to the city. And park and trail dedication fees as adopted by the city council must be paid at the time of certification of the parcel division. This request meets the requirements for a meets and bounds parcel split. Planning Commission is requested to review the petition for a meets and bounds split and ensure that it satisfied the requirements of city code, which is the zoning code, and make a recommendation to the city council to approve the parcel split with the conditions defined in resolution 2024-41.
Thank you. All right, so I am really not familiar with how this proceeds, but
Yeah.
you guys have, Tanner and Glenn, you've gone through a few of these, I'm sure. So do we just have to have any comments, or is there anything actually?
It kind of already defined it, but I guess for me, Aaron, just reconfirming what you guys have gone through. Again, that's what we have staff for, why I like to lean on them. This is their role to make sure that that stuff is accurate, and as long as staff has shown that it meets
Yeah.
said requirements, there's not a whole lot to jump through here unless there was some weird anomaly that we needed
That you might know
to
of?
address.
Okay.
So
So
this is pretty
essentially,
simple.
you guys need to ensure that, each parcel divided off needs to be a minimum of 5 acres. So the original parcel is this entire area, which is 20 acres. They're dividing off 10 and 10, and then splitting the 10 into 2 5s. So that meets 5 acre minimum.
Yep.
Must have 300 feet of road frontage. If you look on the survey, their original lot obviously is gonna have over 1,000
Yep.
feet of road frontage.
541.
The next parcel, that is a 10 acre divided equally in half, has got 541, and actually, the parcel on the left has more because it also parallels University, so it's got twice as much. So that checks the box on number 2. Number 3, the parcel must contain 23,000 square feet of buildable area. Well, that's about half an acre.
So we're there.
If you look at these 2 5 acre parcels, there's some little circles with numbers by them. Those are soil borings to show that the soil there could support building a structure. Check off number 3. Number 4, appropriate public utility road drainage easements. Well, this is a rural residential. We don't have any drainage, city storm sewer, but they have appropriately given us 33 feet of frontage for a public roadway should this be paved. They check off item number 4, and then item number 5 is conditional, and the city will not hand them an approval until we have the park dedication fees paid for each of the 2 new lots at $2,000 apiece. So it meets the criteria of all 5.
Okay.
Thank you for confirming that.
You bet.
Yeah, again, everything we've seen here, that I don't see anything that would be, that would argue against approval.
Right.
The only other thing I can think of is, the long-term comprehensive plan, and does this division meet the long-term comprehensive plan for the rural residential zoning district of the city of East Bethel? In terms of meeting the comprehensive plan, these are more than 2 acre splits at this point. They're 5 acre splits. And if you look at most of the lots that surround this, they're smaller than 5 acres and probably right at the 2 or even smaller than 2. So this clearly meets the 2 acre minimum according to the comprehensive plan in the rural residential zoning district.
Right, and there's plenty of developable land for smaller lots.
Correct. If sewer and water were ever to come that far, ever, it could be subdivided again. Those smaller lots could be subdivided again, but that's not likely to happen.
Jets and cars can fly too.
Glenn?
I'll make a motion to approve the meets and bounds split of the 20 acre parcel located at 516 to 17th Avenue Northeast, PID number 073323310001, with the staff recommendations included.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. And any discussion? If not, all in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That motion passes. Okay. Thank you for coming tonight.
July
And if you want to hang around, we've got exciting conversations going on here now.
This goes before council on July 8th.
Yep,
Yes.
back in 2 weeks for city council final approval.
Here 4C then, we're jumping back to.
Okay, so we've got the next one is the driveway access and standards.
Yep, and we'll need to do a public hearing
page
after we get
28.
done with staff report on this one, but
Oh, man.
let me give you that real quick. Let me get to the right location here of the proposed change. As you will see, it's this little red line item here, but let me give you the staff report. At the May 13th, 2024, well, this is the wrong one. Let's go to the right one. There we are. The May 13th, 2024 council meeting, there was discussion to revisit the driveway access standards ordinance. City council directed staff to review the ordinance and provide recommended changes to address the concerns. City staff have reviewed section 15 driveway access and standards and have provided a recommended change to address these concerns. The proposed change was presented to the city council at the May 23rd, 2024 work meeting, and the direction was to follow the city's established ordinance revision process by having the planning commission review and hold a public hearing. Planning commission should hold a public hearing and review and discuss the proposed changes and provide staff with guidance and or a recommendation to the city council to revise section 15 driveway access and standards. I can tell you that I reviewed those standards and came to the conclusion that without changing too much in the ordinance, still requiring a 75-foot minimum driveway pavement standard for platted subdivisions would be an important thing to do. But then you'll see item 3 up here, I added that driveway access to properties located in non-platted rural residential zoning districts. So the 1 or 2 properties that are agricultural, that are not part of a platted subdivision, should be improved or paved through the public right-of-way to the property line. And then I included other jurisdictional requirements may be required in addition to city driveway access standards. So if it's on a county road, there'd be additional requirements. If it's on Highway 65, the state would have their own requirements. Then there are a couple of things that have always been, questioned in the driveway standards in the 2 years that I've been here. So I decided while we had the code open for potential amendments that I bring those along. Where permitted, second driveways should be constructed and improved to the current standards at the time of construction. So that way if someone is permitted to add a second driveway, it needs to match whatever the standard is for that property. So if it's in a platted subdivision, it's gonna have to be paved 75 feet or more. If it's in a rural residential property that's not attached to a subdivision, then only to the property line. And then one carryover that comes from our subdivision ordinance is that driveways must meet a minimum setback of 5 feet from abutting property lines, or abutting lot lines. That already exists in our code, but it was separate from the driveway standards and didn't make any sense to me as to why it wasn't included in the driveway standards if that is a placement standard. And then the fire department did request a change in the old number 5, which is now number 8, to Minnesota, which used to say Minnesota Uniform Fire Code. It is actually now the Minnesota State Fire Code. So that prompted that minor grammatical change. So hold a public hearing and then provide recommendations to the council.
Thank you. All right, so we'll open up the public hearing now on this topic, if anyone would like to come up and talk about it. Seeing no one coming, we're going to close the public discussion, or public hearing, and then let's have our discussion. I do have a question. So on number 3, how long is generally the right of way then? Does it vary?
It just depends on if it's the county road, Durant is probably, or all county roads, there's a different standard, depending on the width of the road, the speed of the lanes, what was dedicated during the plat.
You see a lot of the green and white signs that have like a PU.
So they're all gonna vary, but if we try and and put that into writing. I don't know how we can put it into writing to say that it's gonna have to
This just
meet,
covers it.
it's gonna have to meet the standard on Durant, it's gonna have to meet the standard on Klondike, it's gonna have to meet the standard on,
Yeah.
if you just use the generic term that all the way to the property line or through the right of way, then that's an applicable term that would work with every possible scenario that could come up.
Well, in my opinion, I think you did a good job on the rewrite on it.
Just to be clear, this is not retroactive to any existing property, but it's for new construction going forward.
That's correct. Yep, anything after the date of publication of the new revision, that would be the new standard.
One question on that. So if we have somebody that's currently in that, and you guys probably all know the property I'm thinking of that's currently in that 1 year, they would be able to apply this, or when they got their construction permit and they start construction, would they be held to that?
So this is a zoning permit that comes to my desk, and I would then probably use the discretion to say, our new ordinance wouldn't require that you pave more than 50 feet or whatever that standard is in
Right away.
the rural residential right away. I think it's probably 33 feet or something on Durant, but don't quote me on that. As I've found, every county road has a little bit different of a standard. So I would use that discretion to say, nah, we're gonna use the new standard just because it's less restrictive than what it would have been. However, if you all feel that we should apply the more stricter standard, then I would, city staff would take that direction as well.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I think it's a necessary and overdue needed improvement. Good job.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve this.
Okay, so your motion is to,
Yeah, it is.
Recommend,
Is there a number at the top here?
Recommend for approval.
There is
Recommend.
not, it's just a revision to the ordinance as
I'll
presented.
make a recommendation for a revision to the ordinance as written.
Second?
great. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? No? Sorry, I didn't say no. That motion passed. Okay, then the next one is a discussion about section 10-151 interim use permit and acreage requirements for domestic farm animals, non-domestic animals prohibited. And that's on page 30 and 30 to 32 of our packets.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. At the May 13th, 2024 City Council meeting, there were multiple resident complaints regarding roosters lodged at the public forum. City Council directed staff to review the ordinance and provide recommendations to address resident concerns. City staff revised section 10-151 and have provided a recommended change. The proposed change was presented to City Council at the May 23rd, 2024 work meeting. City Council direction was to follow the city's established ordinance revision process and have the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and review. Planning Commission should hold a public hearing, review and discuss the proposed change, and provide staff with guidance or a recommendation to the City Council on section 10-151 domestic farm animal change. As you will see on page 32, the recommendation strictly addressed roosters, as the ordinance was unclear as to the number of roosters allowed on lots 1.5 acres or larger. My recommendation is that no more than 1 rooster be permitted on all parcels larger than 1.5 acres. The existing language of roosters being prohibited on lots smaller than 1.5 acres still exists, but 1 rooster on anything larger than 1.5 acres. And I am open to suggestions on this one. As I alluded to earlier, I am a city boy. I know nothing about roosters.
Okay.
Just know that there were complaints.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. And we will open up the public hearing on this first of all, and then we may have some questions for you.
Sure.
So if anyone would like to talk about this, oh, yay. If you could please state your name.
Rita Bilgen, 23600 Goodhue Street Northeast. And I would still vote for no roosters at all. no matter size, no matter whatever, because we still have one not too far from us, and it's very irritating, and it's only a single rooster.
Right.
All right, so thank you.
Thank you, Rita, very
Noted.
much. Okay, anyone else want to talk?
Petra Fager, 22343 Sandy Drive, Northeast. My understanding is the chickens, it's wide open. Is that inaccurate? Okay. So I guess in noting this, I would say one rooster for a large parcel seems restrictive. If we are growing out different breeds of chickens, for example, we'd need one rooster per breed. Something like one rooster per 2 acres, or I don't know. It seems like the other piece I would consider is that one of the reasons that you have a rooster is for flock protection. And so if your one rooster dies, it's going to be 2 years before you can grow the new one out where it can really be helpful. And the existing rooster would normally train in the younger rooster into how to act and how to be. So if you only have the one, and now you have to bring in a rookie that doesn't know anything and grow it out, that's hard. So that's my 2 cents.
Our ordinance only permits, and I don't even know the scientific name of that's in the ordinance type of chicken in the first place. I don't know if all of those chickens fall under the same scientific name that's in the ordinance or not. If it's a bird and it has feathers and a comb and makes a crowing noise, that's a rooster to me. I don't know the difference between the chicken breeds. So in response to your suggestion about different breeds, I have no idea if they all fall under that scientific name or not. So
I would think they would, but
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else want to talk about roosters? No. Okay, so then we're going to close the public hearing on this, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion.
Someone remind me, wasn't there a recent change to some of this in the last year on chickens?
It had-
yeah, we did have a revision. I think it was March of 20. We're in 24 now. 23.
23?
23?
Yeah.
March of 23 is my recollection.
And do you recall what the change
Yes.
was approximately?
I do not.
Okay.
Well, I think
I know it was lightening, or lessening the restrictions.
that there, you could have more chickens.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is it,
Right.
so, yeah. it
Yeah,
got looser.
Subdivision O there, roosters are prohibited on lots smaller than an acre and a half was included in the revision. I don't remember what it said prior to that. I
Yeah.
could
that-
dig
that's-
back, but it's gonna take me a little bit to find out.
As someone who lives along Viking, I hear plenty of road noise, and I can tell you, I definitely hear roosters all day over the road noise. And it is a nuisance for something that is pretty, not far, but far enough that I shouldn't have to, but I hear it. So it's, to me, again, I can appreciate, I can understand the why. At the same point, when you're also up next to, again, the neighborhood, rural or otherwise, they make noise, you hear them, it travels far.
I agree with the 1.5 acres prohibition. I think something that is a large acreage is a whole different story than a development. It's kind of like the difference between city and country to me, or suburb and country. And we always talk about preserving the rural character, but to me, chickens and hens are the rural character, or a part of that. And I don't know why we would restrict it in a large, tending toward a farm or hobby farm type of property.
Diana?
So I can tell you that the complainants at the public forum were complaining about a parcel of property that's in a platted subdivision. However, the parcel is 4.86 acres in size. Now, the complaint was multiple roosters on this property. I don't know if one rooster would generate the same complaints as multiple roosters, but this is a platted subdivision of the city, and the lots are much larger than 1.5 acres, and this generated a complaint from multiple neighbors. Just another factor to consider when you're thinking about numbers and or options, and I toggled with all of these in my head, whether we restrict them from platted subdivisions or how we go with it, and I thought the most simple trial might be allowing one rooster on properties larger than 1.5 acres as a potential fix to see if that eliminates complaints, but I think this is one that most cities try and prohibit roosters completely just for the purposes of complaints, but
I thought we had a rooster prohibition, before the change last year, thought roosters were prohibited.
On lots, but on the one.
if you give me
In like this, yeah, in that type of an area, in smaller lots.
In the rural residential townhome division, I think they are, isn't it?
yeah, or
Well, it
no,
would
nothing
be-
in R1 or R2 or our business zones you're allowed, so this is
Right.
I'm trying to think of the quickest way I can get to what the ordinance was prior to, I think it was March or May.
It was pretty early in the year from what I recall.
I'm now surrounded by chickens that
You're
my
surrounded by
granddaughter
chickens.
loves, so, but I don't have a rooster problem.
You know it when you do.
While he's looking, Corey, what are your thoughts?
I don't like roosters. I had neighbors, my lot is 3 acres, my neighbors are pretty equivalent. I had a neighbor last summer move in, got chickens. Chickens are not a problem. They got one rooster. I was naive to think they only made noise in the morning. I'm very wrong. It's all day long. And thankfully they decided to have it for dinner this winter. So, I understand having them helps the hens have eggs better, and they intend to get another one, which I'm disappointed about. So, I don't think 1.5 acres is nearly enough to say no roosters, in my opinion. I think that I'm okay with the chickens. Have as many as you want. You know, but the roosters, I certainly understand the complaints, and I never have complained to my neighbor, but I'm very disappointed, to be honest.
Are you guys on the side, would you support the one rooster, or would you prefer to see no roosters?
I guess if there were, how do I say this? I guess the only time I would see the rooster again be, I like how Aaron had said with, not within in a subdivision, regardless of size of lot. So if it's not a plotted subdivision, if it's rural, non-subdivided area, one, and I agree, larger than 1.5 acres. What that number is yet, I don't know, but like I said, I don't want to be so restrictive that somebody who doesn't, who does have the land and want to be able to have their farms, absolutely. But
I agree.
as rural as we are out here, and the feel, I think you can still get some of that feel without having to have the full hobby farm in a plot subdivision, or in some of the smaller lots. So again, I don't want to say absolutely not for no reason whatsoever at all, but I think we still have to be cognizant as a city as a whole as well, that we also have residents that don't live in the rural residential, that do live in plotted subdivisions, and they like some of the rural feel, but they may not want the other part either. So I think there's people in both camps, and I think we need to be respectful to all parties in that, if that makes sense. That's kind of the camp I'm sitting in.
Okay.
So I would say, if I had to summarize it, yeah, not subdivided or plotted subdivisions, probably at least 2.5 acres and no more than 1 rooster on any size lot, I think is the terms I'm settling with.
No, you said no more than 1 rooster on any size lot, or no roosters.
How Aaron had it written in here with the one, just a max of 1 when it fits above, outside of, in rural residential, non-subdivided, plotted, or plots over 2.5 acres, I think
Okay.
is where my,
So hold your thoughts.
yes.
And on this side, the rooster pro people.
I think there's a difference between a platted subdivision and I don't know that the one, I was, after the example that Aaron showed us, I don't know that 1.5 is the right number necessarily in a platted subdivision. But in a rural, like maybe the breakdown should be by acreage where it's not a platted subdivision. So you have 1 up to 5 or whatever acres, 2, 10 to what, say 10 to 20, 3 beyond that. But that's without being a person who knows a lot about chickens and roosters.
Mhm.
So just trying to be fair to people that do. Where,
And their neighbors.
right, but when you have, like, say 20 acres, that's a lot of land to not be bothering your neighbors with rooster sounds. And maybe in the division, I mean, the ordinance, there should be something about, I mean, there's still a noise ordinance, so maybe there's some language regarding the noise ordinance that could be part of that.
Just to throw a point out there, but similar but different than with animals, right? I mean, we have residents that complain about dogs barking, and it's really hard to enforce and have any action with that too, though.
Right, and the only reason I bring it up is so that if there was a situation that was somehow out of hand, there might be some remedy as opposed to none.
So you requested what the ordinance looked like prior to. I was able to find the red line version of what the ordinance was changed from to back in March of '23. It looks like no roosters shall be allowed without approval of an IUP by the city council. We did away with the IUP for chickens, so that eliminated that. Roosters are prohibited on lots smaller than, and it looks like it was previously 3 acres and changed to 1.5 acres.
Okay.
So does that answer your question as
Yes.
to what it was before? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I guess also just to piggyback again, glad it, like I said, like Aaron had mentioned, as a starting point as well, and I think that's where I lean on the 1 rooster. Let's see how it goes. I think we've now already seen some pushback from what's changed in the last 12 months. So again, I don't want to be so restricted there's nothing at all, but and now seeing this, I like 3 better than 2.5 if that's what our code was, and we had less opportunity for complaints at that time. I guess I like going back to the 3 and just no more than 1. And
So I can address your question regarding noise ordinance. Although it may be a nuisance to hear a rooster crow, the volume at which the rooster crows is not going to reach the decibel level required to enforce the noise ordinance. We've already worked on that with the parcel that had the complaints. What may be a possibility is that the repetitiveness of it by multiple roosters meets the definition of a public nuisance, and we were able to use that language in state statute to address the concerns in this neighborhood. We're still working through the code enforcement process on that property, so that's not an immediate resolution when there is a potential complaint. We would have to then work our way through our code enforcement process if they chose to disregard our notices or letters and or fought the city's position on that, which could take 6 to 9 months. Meanwhile, the neighbors are still uncomfortably listening to what they've complained about. So those are some things to consider.
Does the dog ordinance address it from the noise level standpoint? Because I don't know that that goes through the threshold yet either.
No, so that the dog ordinance allows for the sheriff's office to enforce based on multiple people in the same parcel or multiple people from adjacent parcels to the complainant to be a violation of the noise ordinance.
So it doesn't have to have a decibel level.
Not for dog barking.
Could it be the same for roosters? do you think?
Well, you can recommend whatever change you want. I'm pretty sure that Lieutenant Peters from the sheriff's office, when he gets called to go, or one of his deputies get called to go listen to roosters crow, has better things to do with his time. But I mean, the ordinance is the ordinance, and we could certainly attempt to send city staff out there to do those things. But I mean, anything can be put into code. It's just a matter of.
But who makes that decision on the enforcement or non-enforcement of it? You know, like with the dogs, there's not a decibel level. I'm asking if.
So that's
if it
based
could
on
be-
what the code says, and our city procedure is that city staff do not address dog complaints. That is handed off to the sheriff's office. We pay them to do that.
And that usually requires multiple, per
And if-
incident,
And if
multiple
the dog needs to
neighbors.
be impounded, we don't have,
Yeah.
I mean, technically we have that authority, but we give that authority to the sheriff's office, who has a dog handler who does those sort of tasks.
And that takes away from our already limited hours that we already have in that space.
Okay.
I have just one comment or comment stat along with Glenn's is just saying no more than one rooster is permitted on all parcels, to me seems really restrictive for those that have, 10 acres
Or 73 acres.
or 73 acres. So is there a way that this could state like roosters are prohibited? I'd like the 1.5, maybe even get bigger, because if you have 2 acres, depending on where you are, 2, since we're doing the interim use permits, an acre where there's no trees is a lot, you're gonna hear it. An acre that's surrounded with trees, you're not gonna hear it.
So
a lot of it has to do
interim
with-
use permits are no longer required for chickens.
Oh, they're no,
No
okay,
longer
okay,
required.
Thanks, okay, but I do think that it
Or
needs to-
roosters.
I think that we need to have, the ability for somebody, just like Glenn said, that's got a lot of acreage to be able to have roosters. And I think, our folks out here gave a valid explanation of why that would happen if they're going to be allowed to have a farm. And they're gonna have chickens on there.
But if someone had 5 acres or 10 acres and wanted more than one rooster, they could apply for an IUP, no?
No.
Not required anymore.
No, so it's really, to me, and I have to apologize because I have to make myself maybe a little bit more familiar with some of the areas, but I know we have parts of our city that, you have large acreage properties. And those acreage properties aren't going to have probably as many complaints, by their surrounding residents because they're not gonna hear the roosters. So I would hate to see us have something that restricts somebody from, having chickens that, would need multiple roosters in the future. That's just my opinion.
I agree with you on the large
Mhm.
hobby farm, multiple
Yeah.
acres. But I can tell you, in my neighborhood, the lots vary up to 5 acres from 2 acres. Roosters should not be in our neighborhood.
We have 3 in our neighborhood, and you all know where I live, and I hear them every day
Yeah.
at 7 and noon and 1 and 3. So I do understand that. I just want to be careful that we're restricting that and controlling that problem, but still leaving it open to the hobby farm areas and the people with the large amount of acreage to be able to have more than one rooster if it's required for their goal, their farming goal on the land.
And I hear what you're saying. I guess my counterpoint to that though is if some of the existing complaints right now are on a property approximately 5 acres to round up, and they have even claimed one rooster, and we're having multiple complaints. And although there are some closer neighbors, it's still a large lot, right? I mean, I would consider 5 acres a nice sized lot, but even if one on that lot is enough to, you know, again, kick up an issue around surrounding neighbors, if you, let's say you are that 10-acre parcel outside of a subdivision or of a neighborhood, and you have, okay, now we say you can have 2 or 3 because you have 10 acres. What's to say that they're not pointed and now all calling back at that opposite direction? So that's my worry when you going more on that. I get if it's a huge parcel, but
And,
like
and
I said,
I'm not thinking 5, because I don't think 5 acres is that big. I don't
It's
think
not.
that's
are
big
you
enough.
thinking 20 then?
I'm
or-
thinking like the 10 acres. I mean, there's a lot of people out here got 10, 20, 30 acres. And if they decide they want chickens and it's primarily farmland and that's what they do, I would just hope this wouldn't limit that for them.
So with you guys, what would it, what would you like to see on here to address your concerns?
I guess for me, I go back to some of the stuff I said earlier again. Essentially no neighborhoods.
Yep.
Nothing on some, no roosters on anything under 3 acres.
Or subdivided?
I did really, and technically any actual neighborhood, but yeah, subdivided. I think it's how you had said it earlier.
Platted
Or
subdivision.
platted subdivision, thank you.
Platted subdivision.
We already have some language
Yeah.
for farm animals that
Sure.
don't allow them in platted subdivisions for lots that are smaller than a certain size. If 80% of the lots are,
Sure.
it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
complicated, yes, yes.
Yeah, and then I guess I'm still on the one, on all parcels, for the most part. I mean, like, I'm not seeing more than 2 on anything under 25 acres. I just, it's, like I said, even 1 on 5 already seems to be an issue, so 2 on 10 is still 1 per 5, that's just as much of an issue in that. So if I was to budge on my thoughts on, I guess I'm still in the camp of just the 1 on all parcels for now, and again, right, to change my opinion down the road, and let's see where this takes us. I mean, it's been a year since we opened it last time, and now we're already making changes. I don't wanna open it so far that, okay, now we gotta bring back restrictions. So I'd rather, if we're gonna progress, let's start small and work our way up instead of, okay, here's this, and do we need to pull back?
To be fair, I
Well-
think the problem was on a 3 acre that you rounded up to 5. It's not a 5 acre parcel. Is that,
And I would say
Correct.
that the reaction was very strong at that meeting and rightfully so in these people's minds.
What was that, 4.8, right? I saw.
Yeah, it's 4.8
is that
something.
my mistake? That was a
4.86.
3 acre.
Yeah, I was, like I said, I was rounding, being close.
No, you're correct there.
So, I mean, this is a platted subdivision, but then you see you have smaller lots here, you have another separate platted subdivision on this side with even smaller lots. Again, I don't know how you make, there's not 2 lots in this entire city that are the same.
Yeah.
So to make a standard that's universal, good luck, I don't know how you do it. So that's why you gotta come up with something that is doable. And
I
that's
think-
why I just went with the no roosters on and smaller than 1.5 acres and 1 permitted on everything else, just to move the conversation
Be
forward, if you
amicable.
will.
Well, and I guess that's where I go back to, again, my earlier statement. Like I said, I like how you had it written, except for I guess I'd probably almost go back to the 3 acres.
What if it weren't acreage, but platted subdivisions as a starting point of no chickens, and then from that acreage and possibly some language about distance from a platted subdivision?
So chickens are allowed in platted subdivisions right now.
Right, but we're talking about roosters.
Roosters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you start picking and choosing what you want in a platted subdivision, I don't know how we're gonna keep the rules straight for enforcement purposes either, but we'll figure it out.
Is there a way that we can kind of table this and get more information, kind of take a look at the breakdowns of stuff? How some of the land, the bigger parcels are. It's just a question.
Yeah.
I guess, help me understand what you're
So if
referring
I'm
to.
looking at areas where you have the 3.5, there's subdivided parcels and you have homes and you're in a neighborhood, I understand roosters and people having problems with roosters because, for various issues. But in other areas of the city where it is primarily hobby farms, I would need to know more of how many areas we have like that, because I would just hate to restrict people, if that makes sense. Because I do know that we have some very large areas where people have, 10, 15, 20 acres. And if they wanted to have those animals and they don't have a lot of neighbors and they're near wetland areas, I would hate for them to be restricted. So if there's a way, that we can think about not having to come back to this in a year and having something in O that allows for consideration in those situations.
My personal feeling is if there was a strong enough request for it, I think we'd be hearing for it, or we'd be hearing it.
Okay.
But for conversation's sake, that'd be where I'd be at. But, and not, I try not to table things solely just for the fact of it's here, let's try to get it done, otherwise we're just keep adding stuff to the next agenda.
Yeah, and that was only my consideration, because
no.
like you said, we were here a year ago and now we're here again.
Yep.
So, but,
Yep.
I'm fine with being here again next year.
I'm gonna make a motion then.
Mhm.
So, that we, make no other changes to the ordinance, recommend that, except in O, we would say, roosters are prohibited on lots smaller than, roosters are prohibited on lots smaller than 1.5 acres or in platted subdivided neighborhoods. And then we would just keep no more than one rooster is permitted on all other parcels.
With no
Motion.
exception for large acreage?
Yes. And if there's not a second, that's okay.
I would second it. I agree.
Okay. So basically, all I'm doing is inserting or plat, at the end of 1.5 acres or platted subdivided neighborhood in there. Okay,
That does
So we-
give us future opening to, if somebody comes to us
Yeah.
in a request. The large
How does
area.
that give us an opening? Or
Well,
that
then we can just relook at the rules again and decide. if
It
we
would just
wanna
be an
change it.
ordinance revision again.
Yep, it would just
Yeah.
be
If
an
there's a
ordinance
strong enough
revision
demand.
again, if we had a lot of people come and ask for that change.
so we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Can we have a bit more
Oh,
discussion?
I'm sorry, we can have discussion, of course we can.
I don't know if it's possible, but if it were possible, it would be great to look at, if that were the ordinance change, some mechanism for people to apply for some interim use permit or whatever that have acreage where we could review it on a case-by-case basis. I don't know what the demand is for more than one rooster, but it seems like there should be a mechanism for people besides you can't do it.
So we've stricken interim use permit requirements for chickens to include roosters from the fee schedule. So therefore, if we go back to adding an interim use permit application for farm animals, chickens, roosters,
Only
we
roosters.
also have to alter the fee schedule then to put that back in. Not saying that it can't be done, but that's another ordinance revision of the fee schedule.
But only for roosters, not for chickens.
Sure.
But wouldn't we?
I don't think that would.
Would you be, I think,
I mean, we're
I
only
think that
limiting.
considerates, if somebody wanted to come, if we have a second on that, but if somebody did come to the city and say, I would like this and I have a 20-acre farm, they could always request that to Aaron.
Oh,
And then
through
Aaron
Aaron's
would bring
request.
it through us for, or talk about consideration.
Aaron's answer is no, the ordinance says you're not allowed to
Okay.
have X, Y, or Z.
Yep. When I say demand, that people would come to a public forum at city council and start requesting the need for it.
Okay.
And then city council at that time would kick it back to us to say, please check this ordinance for revision, we're having a demand for
That's
X.
how we got to where we're at today.
We're basically
Okay.
limiting them in a platted subdivision. If they've got 20 acres, they're not in a platted subdivision.
Right,
And they can
right,
have one,
mhm.
Just
Yep.
one though.
For now, yeah,
for now, you know.
Right, and then if
let's see
they
where it goes.
requested a hearing, then they could come if they wanted more.
Well, we are enforced or complaint-based, so if somebody had more than one on a 20-acre or 30-acre, then nobody would know unless neighbors complain.
Unless there's an issue.
That's a very good point.
With that, I'll call the question.
Okay, let's try this again. So,
Thank you
all
for
in
that.
favor of the motion to insert or platted subdivided neighborhood into O?
With Aaron's already written
Yes.
changes.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience
Alright.
and your work.
Let me get us back to
Item 6.
Okay,
Is this one our last one?
this
all
one.
right. We're gonna talk about sidewalks and trails
And then we'll have
on page 38 to 43.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. City Code Section 66-165, sidewalks and trails has been unclear or not enforced in development agreements by the city. The Parks Commission regularly review development plans in conjunction with parks and/or per-lot park dedication fees required for each development. At the January 9th, 2024 Park Commission meeting, city staff were asked to research the possibilities of having trail dedication fees in lieu of trail construction in new developments. City staff researched other cities in the metro area, and the results of that research was listed below. The city of Ramsey allows for, in lieu of trails, $1,500 per unit. The city of Andover allows for, in lieu of trails, $1,066 per unit. And the city of Chisago allows, in lieu of trail, $450 per unit. After some discussion at the May 14th, 2024 Park Commission meeting, they provided a formal recommendation to have the option to have a trail dedication in lieu of trail for the amount of $1,200 per unit, plus dedicating right-of-way on any new development in lieu of trail construction. City staff are requesting the Planning Commission review Section 66-165, which is on page 39, sidewalks and trails, and make a recommendation to accompany the parks recommendation to the City Council for their possible consideration of an ordinance revision.
Thank you. Aaron?
This one will not require a public hearing. There is nothing, a revision proposed in front of you. This is strictly conversation and feedback to provide the council on the trail requirement and/or trail dedication fees as suggested by the Parks Commission. If you take a look at page 39, there is the ordinance on sidewalks and trails. Essentially, if you look at the right-hand column in the chart, that defines when a trail and/or a sidewalk would be required on parcels or subdivisions within the city. There is some discussion, or that was what led to the discussion. I did include the minutes of the meeting there for you to review, but in our more dense neighborhoods, maybe in the corridor area of the city, requiring a trail walking trail on one side and a sidewalk on the other side may not necessarily be fit in within the city's parks plan. But in our rural residential subdivisions, such as Strandland Farm, which we just approved, it may be valuable to require a trail, as no sidewalk is required. But if it doesn't fit into the parks plan or the trail plan, and there's never gonna be a trail there, then we end up with situations like disconnected potential trails from one subdivision to nowhere. So the idea of allowing or affording the Parks Commission the opportunity to look at and compare the parks plan or the trails plan with subdivision proposals to say, yes, we agree that this doesn't fit within the parks plan, and we would like to see a trail dedication fee paid instead. The Parks Commission did recommend also dedicating right-of-way for the trail. I don't know by statute if we can require that the developer give us right-of-way for something that isn't gonna be developed, plus pay for the fee associated with that is an attorney discussion that needs to happen. I have my doubts on whether we can require both. A fee as well as dedication of land for a potential trail that you're telling them that they don't have to put in.
Yeah.
That's
Counterproductive.
so, up for discussion. I will do my best to interpret what is in the chart if you have questions, but that is the crux of the issue here is, should a trail in a more dense subdivision be required to accompany a sidewalk if it doesn't fit within the parks plan, or in a rural subdivision if it doesn't fit within the parks plan? And would a fee in lieu of trail be something that the city parks could use to upgrade trails or connect trails or make trails that already exist in the plan
That makes sense.
doable? Like we do with park dedication. If we have a subdivision that doesn't intend to have a city park because it doesn't fit in the parks plan, we allow the developer to pay per unit to a park dedication fee, and then we take that money and put it in the parks general fund, and we use that to improve parks that are already in the plan throughout the city, and or acquire new land for parks, or let it sit until a plan or a park or repair needs to come up. So all options available to send along with the Parks Commission's recommendation.
Could you describe how the trail looks, what it's made out of?
Yeah, we're a platted subdivision with a minimum overall density of 3 acres, or 3 units per acre. No, that's a 30-foot width around the trail. I think it's in our,
I mean, I did see that there was, it can vary in width, but does that mulch in it? Is it dirt?
no, the trails we would require to be bituminous, usually
Hard surface.
asphalt. They're probably 6 feet wide, but I think we require they dedicate 3 or 4 feet on either side for maintenance purposes, so that we can upgrade the trail at any time. But that is a dedication that they have to have, and the depth of the asphalt and the engineering standards are all part of a engineering plan that comes with the subdivision requirements.
Sometimes it can look like even just a shoulder off of a county road. So,
In more urban cities, they're dedicating trails as part of a driving lane, for instance, now. I
Okay.
can tell you there's a city just north of us that has just connected a trail to another trail by widening the right-of-way and putting part of the trail in the shoulder of the road, if you will, or the parking lane. That city shall remain nameless, however.
if I remember right, I think Viking is similar to that on the shoulder. Part of that shoulder was paved by the parks. I guess the one thing I'll state, and I know I've said this in the past, but other meetings when, when I read this, I try to come into this with the same intent that I think of with our commission to the city council. We're an advisory committee to them, just as much as we hope that they take our advice for whatever we're considering or sending up to them. I want to make sure I'm doing the same and giving that same respect to the Parks Commission. And, I guess so with that being said, my first thoughts with this, as I read through it, if this is the will of the Parks Commission, since they've done majority of the research, this is really their purview, and that it's coming through us, I appreciate the opportunity to have a say in it. But I think they did a fairly good job here. I'd be in favor of the $1,200 per unit, but like Aaron said, I would not be in favor of also asking for the money and the reservation of the land or the reservation of the right of way. So I'd be in the camp of, yeah, $1,200 for a dedication fee, you know, at their discretion. It's like I said, that's their department, that's their purview, and I back their recommendation on that to the city council.
Yeah, their recommendation is an option to have the dedication fee in lieu of the trail, which means that ultimately the city council, through developers agreement, through preliminary plat and final plat approval, could require both.
Yeah.
Trail and sidewalk in lieu of the fee. Or they could say, nope, we agree a sidewalk is relevant. We'll take the money for the trail that you don't need to put in because it's not going to go anywhere. So it's really allowing flexibility for the city council to have the option to agree to it instead of it being required, but us not requiring it of the developer in contrary to what the code says. So I think that's the clarification they're looking for.
Okay. Does anyone have any concerns about this?
I have questions. One was the premise that sidewalks and trails have been unclear or not enforced, and this chart seems pretty clear. I don't know why it wouldn't be enforced if that's what the rules are, but it might make more sense to say it's not well crafted in terms of applicable to every situation. But it doesn't seem unclear to me, and it doesn't seem enforcement is an issue that we need to address. So that was my first thing. Next was how $1,200 was come up with the cited places. Ramsey is a huge developed town. Andover is a very developed. Chisago is, I mean, a totally different geography, but there's quite a range, and it's probably similar in terms of size or a little bit smaller in government reach. But places that might be more relevant would be St. Francis or Ham Lake or Isanti. So I'm just wondering why these three were selected. And
So to answer your question, Commissioner Terry, this staff report was copied and pasted from the Parks Commission report. I didn't do any of the research into this one. I strictly carried over what they had at their meeting for you to provide input. I don't know whether St. Francis and the other city you referenced just didn't answer back or they don't have it. I don't really know.
right, but so my questions were how did $1,200 become the right number? And also it doesn't say where that would go, where that, like, park dedication fee goes to parks.
It would go to a trail dedication fee.
Yeah.
It would go to a trail fund.
I'd venture to say, Glenn, that they probably have a rough idea, and again, I'm totally making an assumption here, but if I was sitting on the Parks Commission and I'm trying to come up with this number, I also probably have a pretty good idea of what trails cost. Right, if that's in their purview, so I'm gonna guess they've got some experience with knowing what those expenses are, and that's the number that they came up with that they deemed reasonable in lieu versus what they have to charge probably. And, and in the variation from the cities, again, just making assumptions, I'd venture to say Chisago probably hasn't updated in quite a while, whereas, you know, being they have a downtown Main Street, a piece to their city versus Andover and Ramsey that have had wider range land that they've developed over time in the last few years, and this is a little more reasonable in today's building standards.
And part of your question was where's the money go? And I think that in the minutes, they talked about that too, that there had been some concerns in the past. And this was clarified a little bit more, that it was going into a dedicated fund that would not be able to be shared anywhere.
Yeah, so I mean, the city's gonna end up acquiring a pretty lengthy trail in the Capstone development if that is approved. There's a significant section going through the townhomes, although not by ordinance parallel to the sidewalk on the other side. There is a trail that will run through there. We have a chunk of trail that runs up Baton right over here that require maintenance. That comes out of the Parks Fund if we don't have a fund for trail, or we don't dedicate money for trail. So that would provide us an opportunity to have some money on reserve to patch trails, connect trails together, curb cuts if we need to, make them handicap accessible. There are a number of things that that money would be dedicated and used for, not just squirreled away somewhere in a Parks Fund.
So once the developer builds a trail, then it's the city takes over?
Yep, it's dedicated either through an outlot or by easement to the city. So then as soon as the final plat technically is filed at the county, that land is now the city's responsibility. However, through a developer's agreement, we can write in and typically do that. The city does not take over at final plat time, but the city takes over when the last house of the development is final, or when an outlot is platted and finished, or there's different stages along the way. And I think we're gonna find through the Capstone development, they've proposed multiple phases and then completing the trail within those phases. So as they complete a phase, we'll take over. Could they complete the next phase, then we take over the next section. But the developer is responsible for the paving of those trails prior to turning them over to the city. So
That was gonna be my question.
then we inherit the maintenance, if you will.
Okay. Any other concerns,
Well, that
questions?
addresses questions I had.
Okay, anyone else?
I think trails are a great asset for cities, and in my experience, 2 cities that I was at, they put in lots of trails. They do get use, but they neglect the maintenance aspect, the equipment to maintain them, the staff, the time, the where tree roots heave them. And, you know, like the cities I were at, they wanted to connect Anoka County all the way from Anoka down to Minneapolis, and they did all this. Well, then the cities decided we don't have staff and time to keep them plowed in the wintertime. That creates an uproar. City council members will talk a lot about that. And so I think if they put money aside for maintenance and the specialized equipment needed to maintain them, it's pretty important. I think it's a good step in the right direction.
So you're in
We-
favor of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we would need a motion for recommendation.
Yeah, whatever formal recommendation
Mhm.
you wanna make,
Okay.
I'll scratch that out and we'll pass that along, and the city council can make whatever changes they want, or can leave it the same
Absolutely.
and go from one to the next. Again, this is not an item that came from planning or was brought to my
Right.
attention from Parks, so.
So basically, it's a kind of a statement of approval, or, right?
Yeah, do we like their recommendation?
Mhm.
Do we have alternative recommendations? Do we wanna leave it the way it is? I think there's many ways to go here. Do you agree that $1,200 is too little? Or is it too much? I mean, take your pick.
I think this discussion's been really helpful, and for me, and anybody who's watching the meeting too, to talk about what goes on with these trails and sidewalks. So does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to further the recommendation of the Parks Commission to City Council to enable, let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? To enable the $1,200 per unit right
Trail.
away.
Trail dedication.
Thank you, trail dedication.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion?
Can I ask, does your recommendation include the dedication of right-of-way?
Oh, no,
And the $1,200, or,
no, one or the other.
okay.
You're clear with the motion?
No, well, I'm getting,
Sorry.
Do you want to try again?
Sure.
Okay.
Laptop died. No. No, make
Okay.
a motion to recommend.
Here.
Thank you. That's all right. I'll get it. I got it up here. Make a motion to recommend furthering Park Commission's recommendation of adding a $1,200 per unit trail dedication fee without the right-of-way dedication as a means to help their general fund
In lieu of,
in lieu of the trail itself.
Okay. Now a second.
I will second that.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, any discussion? And if not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Okay, that motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for sitting through all of this.
Nope, you're up.
But you are up if you'd like to. And if you could please give us an update of what was going on with city council.
Not much, really. Good evening, planning commissioners. Just have a short deal. I don't know if you're still aware of that. In September, the city's gonna take over the ice arena responsibilities. So basically, we passed, there was some security things that we had to do, which I didn't know personally, but I guess it was discussed. And we're gonna put out an ad for a part-time worker to help. I guess the guy's name's Jason, that knows how to do all this.
So it'll be
that
city
works for the
staff.
city. Yeah, and then, so we approved all that, and then we had an application for Quick Trip to get the cannabinoid edibles. We passed that, so if you're hungry for those, you can go there. That's all I got.
So we talked about the mobile home with the 2 lots.
Yep.
And setbacks. How did you guys decide on that?
We tabled that for more information,
Okay.
and so we're waiting to hear from staff on that, on permits that were issued, like 20 or 23 of them, and those were approved. So we want to compare them to these 2 that are there to make sure that everything's on the up and up.
It was a tough one.
Oh, yeah,
You know, 'cause
it is, but I
you
mean,
want to.
personally, it's like if you go in there and take a look, they have improved it a lot. I mean, I've been in there prior and it looked like a total dumpster. So the new ones that they brought in, it is improving a lot. So my opinion is like, we don't want to chase them out of there because they are trying to do good for our city. So,
We agree, or I agree.
yeah, I mean, it's important because like I said before, it was horrible.
Yeah.
And they really did a lot.
Yeah, I just think that we were really resting on precedent and not making sure that
Yeah,
the future ones had the
Oh,
same
definitely, yeah.
situation.
but
Well-
like I said, it's really improved a lot.
Well, I agree on the improvement. I know my concern that was there's also other ways to go, to improve and to go about it. And it, just because it had been done in the past doesn't always mean that it's the right way to do it, especially if
Right.
it
Yeah.
can affect other things such as fire code and create other precedents. It's like I said, there's other land that's around there that they could also
Oh, yeah,
work
definitely.
within and with and update over time.
It's
That
nice-
doesn't need to jam it in.
Right, and it's nice to have an open mind when you're looking at all this stuff too, because like, any mobile home park, when you go into it, they're close no matter what. And I mean, I understand too, and we definitely don't wanna have any fire issues that we probably can't control, but they are trying, which is good. I mean, the newer ones are less to burn probably quickly, I'm guessing. The old ones would just go like that. So, but they're trying, so I mean, I think we should work with them, it improves our city too. So that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
I'd like to motion to adjourn.
I'll
Is there
second it.
Okay, great. And all in favor, any discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay. That motion passes. Thank you.